Hello, welcome back. Today it's all about making monsters, creating monsters, and we're looking at an elemental type monster today, a mischief maker as it happens. And I've got a poll ready for you, which I've prepared, and so you're welcome to take part in that poll if you want to. And I'm going to suggest grabbing some food, some drink, making sure that you are comfortable so that you can... This isn't going to be long, but I want you to at least be comfortable while you listen and watch what I am up to. Okay, so I'll put this poll up, grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and I would say 20-25 minutes we should be done. So yes, you don't have to designate a lot of time to this because we'll be done fairly quickly. Anyway, let's get going, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, specifically the version of Dungeons and Dragons called Shadowdark. Shadowdark is really a combination of basic D&D, 5e, and other versions of the game, and other versions of other games, actually, that Kelsey Dion has put together. It is my new favourite version of the game, and I'm sure that we all have one. But we're going to look at making a monster, creating and building a monster for Shadowdark, and it's going to be the Magman. The Magman has been around a while, as far back as Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so I have, of course, done some research on that and tried to pull that all together. So before I get started, normally what I do is I ask you how you would go about making the Magman stat block. So let's do that first. How would you go about building the stat block for the Magman in Shadowdark RPG? I think we're going to put the Shadowdark RPG. Now, it's all right to build it differently to me. Believe it or not, I'm going to just show you the process that I use, and therefore you'll be able to take what I use and do it yourself if you have a different idea in mind. But you might also find that what I'm doing is exactly what you're after. So I'm putting that question in. Feel free to put your ideas forward. I'm going to show you my Google document that I've been working on. So we're taking Shadowdark, this game, and we are really trying to take the essentials of the monster and turn them into a monster stat block for this system, because stat blocks in Shadowdark are very, very simple, very easy to read, and they're very condensed. Okay, so that's something to take into consideration. But because we're dealing with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, going back to this game, I actually looked at Mojo Bob for it rather than the Monstrous Manual, because it's not in the Monstrous Manual, believe it or not. And of course, I looked at 5e, the older version in 5e, because I don't think that the new version is that much different, frankly. So I didn't think I needed to worry too much about that. And so that's what I based all of sort of my maths and the construction of the monster on. So let us go over and show you what I have. I will point out that this is in conjunction with AJ Pickett. So me and AJ are going to be building and making a monster book for Shadowdark with all original monsters. I've actually just talked to AJ on the weekend about this project, and he said, "Are we still working on this?" And I said, "Yes, but I'm waiting for you to draw some art so that I can design the monster stat block for your artwork." So yeah, he's been busy, and I know he's working on another project after Super Atomic. So these things happen. I'm sure we'll get back to it. So this is the 15th draft, maybe more actually. It is the 17th of September here in New Zealand, and we'll just get past the monster law because we're dealing with the monster stat block right now. So Magman, I thought an alternative name, since copyright might be an issue, I thought Magma Spirit was probably the easiest way to sort of describe this. A smiling, malicious, small humanoid cloaked in fire. Fire or flame, maybe? Fire, let's just say fire. This spirit of molten, superheated rock seeks to burn objects and other creatures. That is sort of, you describe it, and then you sort of how it works. Okay, now we have to determine the monster level for this creature. And I always find that going back to AD&D is the best option rather than 5e, because their challenge rating system is just awful. So I actually looked at Mojo Bob for this. Now, if I go to Mojo Bob, it's not in the Monstrous Manual, so I had to go to Mojo Bob, and its hit dice are 2. It gets 2 hit dice, which for me, that means that it probably should be a level 2 monster in Shadowdark. So that was how I figured out how to do that aspect of it, which is why it is level 2. Another aspect is alignment, because alignment for monsters is important. It gives the Dungeon Master a good idea about how they might react when they first come across the player characters, typically. And its alignment is, I believe it's, I think its alignment was really odd, and I had to fiddle around to try to make it work. Where is it? Alignment. Here you go. Any alignment. So any alignment kind of creates problems, because it says any alignment. Shadowdark usually sort of nails you down to you have to pick an alignment, right? So that was problematic. So what I did is I put down alignment neutral. But what I think you can probably do is, if you weren't to use neutral, maybe you would create a new designation for alignment and just put down any. And I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, that would probably be closer to where we're sort of at. Neutral or any, we could just use any, so you can decide as a game master whether it's going to be chaotic, whether it's going to be lawful, whether it's going to be neutral, and that sort of helps determine how they will respond to somebody else. So we're going to put just neutral for now, although I might come back to any. You never know. And then we have to determine its stats or ability scores. We don't use the ability scores, we use the modifier. Now, you're not going to get that information, unfortunately, from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, because I don't usually lay it out that way. Stat blocks are built differently. Okay, so those are the next set of numbers that we need to sort of look at. So I find that going back and just looking at 5e, because they will have actually stated what the ability scores are. So grabbing that monster manual and turning to that, we can go through, and if we look at the strength for our Magman, it is a 7. So the modifier is a -2. So we just do -2. Nice and easy. Its dexterity is a 15, so that will be a modifier of +2. So we just add that in. Its constitution is a 12, so that is a +1 modifier for constitution. Its intelligence is an 8, so that means the modifier is a -1, so we put that in. And then wisdom is I believe 11, so that is a modifier of 0. And then charisma is a 10, so that is also a 0 modifier. So that was all built that way. So I'm using a combination of stuff from different versions of D&D. In terms of its movement, in 5e it's 30 feet. The speed of this creature is, not a 9. I think it's a 9 to 6. So it's got bracket 6. So I put this down as being pretty much, it's probably moving near distance, about maybe 30 feet or something like that. And since 30 feet is basically the near distance, that's what we're going to use. So that's nice and easy, not hard to do. Armor class, I went straight to, because you can't use armor class in AD&D because it's descending, not ascending. It's not going up, it's going down. So it's completely reversed, therefore a little bit confusing. And Shadowdark uses armor class that goes up. The better the armor class, the higher the number. So we need to be working on that system. So go back to 5e, and if you look at the Magman, it says 14. So it doesn't wear any particular armor. It has natural armor because it's made of molten rock. Its dexterity is a 2, so that's 10 plus 2 for the dexterity modifier. That gives you 12. That means it's got another plus 2 worth of natural armor. Now, we don't need to write down that it has natural armor in brackets or anything like that. That is just assumed, okay? We don't need to worry too much about that sort of thing. The next aspect is how many hit points should a monster like this have? Well, it's monster level 2, and it has got a constitution modifier of +1. So there's a formula to this. Now, I have a table. This table is available on Patreon in the free tier for those of you who want it. There is also a table for making 5E monsters for 2014 and 2025. So if you want to make monster stat blocks using that table as well, you can. Different table. It's available there. Free tier. Shadowdark monster creation table, also free tier. You don't have to pay for it. I want you to make your own stuff. So here we do go as we look at level 2, and it tells us a whole bunch of numbers, but to figure out how many hit points it has, the formula is simple. It's an 8-sided dice, so you take the average, which is 4.5, multiply the average of that 8-sided dice of 4.5 by the monster level. So it's got 2 levels, okay, so you get your calculator out, whatever that is doing. So 4.5 multiplied by 2 comes to 9, and then we add +1 only once for the constitution modifier. You do not add the constitution modifier every time it has a monster level. Okay, you only ever add it once for characters and monsters. So the constitution modifier is a +1, so we add that and we get 10, which is why its hit points are 10. Okay. Pretty simple so far, not too difficult. I'm going to show you how to figure out the attacks and how to figure out the damage for this and the attack bonus. All of that is going to be figured out in a second. But before I do that, I want to show you this table again. If you are unsure about whether you're doing something right, these scales are pretty accurate, but they're also very broad. Okay. So if I'm looking at something like a level 2 monster, which the Magman is at this present time, in 5e it's considered a half challenge rating. Just ignore that sort of stuff. Okay. Anything from a 0 to a 3 for the attack bonus is considered appropriate for a level 2 monster in Shadowdark. I've said this before. It is better to have the attack bonus be the same as the number of the monster. So if it's a level 2 monster, make it a +2 bonus. You can go up 1 or down 1 and it's fine. But also too, another factor to take into consideration is the strength modifier and the dexterity modifier. Now our dexterity modifier is a +2. So what you can say is, okay, all right, so instead of trying to make this a really good fighter, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's a really good fighter. It's an elemental spirit of some kind, but it's a low level one that you could use other than an elemental, which is going to be a higher level, right? So we can keep that number down a little bit. We don't need to push it up too high. So I wouldn't take the -2, but I would definitely take the +2 for dexterity. It's a natural weapon. It should be finessable, being able to touch somebody. It should be something you can use dex or strength with, as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to give it a +2 bonus to attack. Now, how many attacks do we get? Well, for level 2 monsters, it can be 1 or 2 attacks. Well, I've given it 1 attack. Why is that? Because we have an ignite ability as well. I might have given it 2 attacks, even for a level 2 monster, if it didn't have the ignite ability, because the ignite ability does more. And so we have to take that into consideration, because that is probably going to do other stuff as well. So hence, that's why there's only 1 touch +2, okay? We're all good. We're within the parameters. And then we go back to our table again, and we look at how much damage should we be doing. And it says a D4 or D6. Okay. So I have put down a D6 damage when they touch you. It's probably going to be burning damage, right? Fire. And then it's got an ignite ability. Now, the ignite ability doesn't have to do a D6 worth of damage. It could do a D4 worth of damage. We're going to come back to that ignite ability, because you get to do, when you hit, you get the D6 plus you get the ignite ability, which you then roll for. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking, oh, this is essentially like I'm making an attack and then I'm making another attack to succeed on that. No, that's not really true. The way it's structured, the way I've structured it is 1 attack, the one that you do the touch with, is an attack roll. The ignite ability is a stat check. It's essentially a secondary attack, but it's tied to the touch. So you don't get to do that secondary attack unless the first attack works. It's not separated. Now we could separate it if we wanted to, but because it doesn't make sense, it makes more sense that the touch needs to happen first before you can ignite and do more damage. That's why the ignite is there. Okay, so we're not actually treading over too much ground. We're not making them roll too many dice. That's the trick. So that's what we've got there in terms of its attacks, and that is how I've structured it. We can go then and have a look at the hit points. Hit points for a level 2 monster is usually averaged as a 9, but it can be anything from an 8 to a 13. We've got 10, so that's fine, so that works all right. Its armor class for a level 2 monster tends to be between 7 and 16. We've got 14, so it's on the higher end, but it's not at the top end. We've got difficulty class, which we'll be looking at very shortly, which is between 9 and 18. It's a huge range. We've got a wide range to pick with. Again, we'll come back to that. I have tended to sort of go with sort of at the low end of the DCs, but not the bottom end. And then, of course, your lowest stat modifier is going to be a -4, and your highest stat modifier is going to be a +3. And if you have a look at our monster, that is exactly what we've got. Nothing is outside of those parameters. That is the easiest way to look and check to make sure your monster is working. And whatever treasure you give the monster should be between poor and normal in terms of quality, okay, when you're designing your encounters. But let's go back to Ignite, because that is basically we have to look at what sort of special abilities, because that's what makes the monster stand out. What special abilities does it have, that it should have, that are tied to it, that make it stand out from every other monster that you're going to be facing? The players are going to experience this. What is it going to be like? And so I started off with fire immunity, or immunity to fire, and it has something like this in 5e. But if you go back to AD&D, you'll also notice that they also have, unless you're attacking with a magical source, like a spell or a magic weapon, you can't damage them. So I've also added in, just a few minutes ago actually, as it happens, impervious, only damaged by magical sources immune to fire. And that is identical in every respect to the Shadowdark elemental, which I believe it is the fire elemental. So impervious is pretty much identical there. And then of course the fire elemental in Shadowdark has got Inferno, but we're not doing Inferno, we're doing Ignite. Ignite is going to be a lot less powerful than the Inferno ability. So this is what it looks like. DC 12 Constitution check or catch on fire and take 1 damage per round for 1d4 rounds. So it's not a lot of damage. It's actually very minimal. We could actually change that and make it a d4, okay, and make it for 1d4 rounds. And that would be fine too, because in all likelihood, with 10 hit points, this monster is going to last less than a round. If all the players take their turn, they're going to kill one of these things pretty quickly. So that's something to take into consideration. You're probably going to see at least, and if you have a group of 5 to 6 people, they'll take out probably 3 of these easily in the first round. And then the rest will take out the next round. And that'll be the end of the battle. It'll be about 2 rounds if you build the encounter the way that the book is sort of stipulated. So we can actually push this up. It doesn't have to be 1 point of damage. It could be a d4. It could be d4 damage each round for 1d4 rounds. So it's ongoing damage once you, okay? And a DC 12 dexterity check to put out the fire. Okay? So, making that check is to put out the fire. A lot of the time when you're dealing with fire things, they have like a DC or dexterity check to put out fire. And so we've done the same sort of thing. It's not a new concept, and often it's written as simple as the way I've just presented it, to escape. Escape is a DC 12 dexterity check to escape. In this case, it's to put out the fire, okay? Otherwise, it's going to keep burning. So that's done. That is nice and easy. We've got that in there. And that is probably not overpowered for a level 2 monster, believe it or not. There's another feature, though, that this monster has that both the 5e and the AD&D stat block or information highlights, and that is the death burst in 5e, but also the fact that they explode when they die. So I've put this down as fire burst. It's why it's highlighted. When the magma spirit dies, it explodes into fire. It explodes. Let's just forget about explodes into fire. It explodes. Let's just put that. All creatures within close range DC 12 dexterity check or take 1d4 damage. So you have to be pretty close to be hurt by it. This was essentially the case. I mean, I was looking at it, and I think they had 5 feet in 5e was the distance or range. Mojo Bob, if we have a look at AD&D monster, it's way, I think it's way down the bottom here somewhere. But you have to be relatively close. It's not a huge blast that's coming out when they explode. So that's what I've sort of gone with, is that you need to be quite close, as essentially you're right next to them, about 5 feet away. Okay? So that's why I've done it that way. And I think that there is the monster. So a combination of 5e, AD&D, and a little bit of tweaking to make sure it fits Shadowdark with the help of this table here. And we've got what we wanted. I made it a DC 12 because it's a level 2 monster. And I find that DC 12s, instead of a DC 9 is probably better. Most characters are going to have like a modifier to their constitution. So, and if they're rolling, a 10, if they roll 10 about 50% of the time, there's a 50% chance or a little bit less that they'll probably succeed at level 1 or 2 on a check like this. Okay? That's the ignite ability. And of course the fire burst is going to work the same way, same sort of DC. So now that I've shown you how I would build it, let us go and have a look at chat and see if there's anything that they want to point out that I might have missed, would think that I might need to add, or they would adjust themselves for the stat block the way they would want to build it. This stat block is a little bit longer and a bit bigger than your normal level 2 monster, because it's got 3 different things going on here. But I think it sort of fits with the type of monster it is. Fairy Fire, Lava Leaper, you seem cold, let me warm you. Chaotic, causes fire is chaotic. Again, AD&D said any. So I am putting it down as, I guess the narrative behind it does suggest that it's chaotic. So Fred Hubert's probably right there. Fred Hubert is a patron and a moderator. Thank you for being here. I've put it down as neutral. But yes, we could mark it down as chaotic. Your non-magical metal weapons hit the creature and does damage, but it melts. I don't think it should do damage. Certainly, if the Dungeon Master wants your weapons to melt when they make contact, I'm not going to tie that into a stat block, but I would certainly say that you can make that adjustment. If that's the sort of thing you can get away with your players, and that's what you want, then do that. That was before seeing you need a magic weapon to hurt it. Okay, all right, cool. Nacho Man is also a patron. How are you doing, Nacho Man? Worst monster to have in a library. Yes, absolutely. And Nacho Man has a story about that, which he's told me. I'm very much aware of that one. Okay, so there is no other feedback. I'm not really too surprised. I did spend a lot of time. This monster has been sitting around for a little bit on my computer in partial form. I think I made a couple of adjustments today, just before the live stream and during the live stream. And of course, I feel like this is an irritative thing. So it's not an irritation. It is a thing that I will adjust based on the play experience, because some monsters look fine on paper until you put them on the table and you run them and you realize they don't work the way you were hoping. So yeah, testing is always required. No testing has taken place yet, but I can assure you there will be testing in the future. My home group will have to deal with Magmen and other things as well. So what's the poll say here? Have you played any version of Dungeons and Dragons? On a channel called How to D&D, I'd be surprised if somebody said no. Everybody said yes. It's almost as if I tailor-made the question so that I get everybody saying yes. Dear. Amusing. So what I will do, for those of you who are interested, and I know not everybody is, but if you are interested, at the end of the week, when I get some time, I will take the Magman stat block for Shadowdark, and I'll put it into the document and put it into the paid tier for Patreon. So you'll find it on Patreon under the paid tier. And for those of you who are interested in not so much the stat block or don't want to pay for Patreon, but just want the free tier, you can go get the Shadowdark monster creation table, and you can also get the monster creation table for 5e as well. And you can build your own monsters using those tables. A little bit of work is required, and of course there's a few other things you might need to sort of nut out, but if you don't mind doing the work yourself, at least the hard yakka has been done, which is figuring out the mathematics for you. I'll make it clear that when you look at the mathematics of any monster, it is probably the only thing that you can control. It is probably the only thing that you can be guaranteed, because you can't really factor in special abilities. It doesn't work that way. Mathematics is probably the only aspect. So the tables and the mathematics you can factor in. But there's another factor with all monsters, and that is that monsters, when you play with them, play differently for different groups and at different times. So don't get too sold on the mathematics of a monster when you're building them. You may well find that the tables I've provided you with and the guidance you're getting from somebody else does not always work. And this is from a person whose degree is in psychology, counseling, philosophy, and mathematics. So, yeah, don't get too sold on the idea that you can solve all your problems with mathematics when you're building monsters, because it doesn't work that way. Soon as you start looking at maths, you've got some sort of guideline, and then when you put in special abilities, forget about it. After that, who knows what's going to happen. So yeah, just some advice there with regard to your monster design and creation. So I'm going to be back next week. We're going to do another monster. There's lots and lots of them to get through, and I'm waiting on AJ to come up with some more monsters that I can build that are completely new for Shadowdark that we'll do here. I'm just waiting for him to draw some stuff up, and I believe he said he would be doing that, so I'm hoping to see that coming through shortly on my little secret feed. Anyway, and we'll start doing those as well. Okay, so yes, been an interesting experience going through the process of adjusting and rebuilding monsters from somebody else's sort of brain, but we got there, and yeah, we'll keep doing it. So huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. I want to thank everybody who took part in the poll. I do appreciate it, even though obviously the question was very much weighted. I want to thank everybody in chat who was commenting and giving feedback and so forth. Fred Huber and Nacho Man, thank you so much. I want to thank all of my paid patrons who support me, because if you didn't do that, I probably wouldn't live stream any of this sort of stuff. It just wouldn't be much point. I would probably just make stuff for myself behind closed doors, and that'd be the end of it. But because you keep doing that, I keep sharing the stuff that I make, and I will continue to do so as long as there's plenty of support to do so. Okay? I want to say, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. Make your own monsters. You can do it. It is not as hard as it might seem. And till next time, keep rolling those 20s.